on her shoes, in her hair. As she looked, the lap of her dress began to squirm and twist. Oh no, she shrieked again into the dusty dimness of the clock tower. Bats flew all around. They squeaked. The whisper of their wings was a soft rising thunder, like a rising whisper of Haven's voices. Oh no, oh no, oh no! A bat fluttered in her hair, caught, squealing. Another flew into her face, and its breath was the stink of a dead hen house. The world spun and swung. Somehow, she blundered to her feet. She beat her hands around her head. The bats were everywhere, all around her in a black cloud. And now there was no difference between the soft, fluttery explosion of their wings and voices. We love you, Ruth. We all love you, Ruth. The voices. We hate you, Ruth. Don't you meddle. Don't you dare meddle. Voices of Haven. She had not forgotten where she was. She had forgotten the trap door which yawned almost at her feet, and as she stumbled toward it, she heard the clock strike, but the sound was muffled, not true, because the hammer had struck her detonator and nothing was happening. She turned, bats flying all around her, and now her incredulous eyes were also bleeding. But though a reddish haze now saw the hammer fall again, and then yet a third time, still the world remained. A dud. Ruth McCausland thought it was a dud, and fell through the trapdoor. The bats flew from her body. Her dress flew up from her body. One loafer flew up from her foot. She struck the ladder, half turned, and landed on her left side, with a crunch that broke all her ribs. She struggled to turn over and somehow managed to do it. Most of the bats had found their way over, and something managed to do it. Wait, what? Oh, I need to go back down. Most of the bats found their way back through the trap door into the welcoming darkness of the clock tower. But a half dozen or so still circling, confused. Below the roof of the third floor corridor, the sound of their voices so alien and insectile, so hive-like and warm with insanity. These were the voices she had been hearing in her head ever since July 4th. So, town was not just going mad. That would have been bad. This is worse. God, it was worse, much worse. And it had all been not all for nothing. Jorgensen's M16 had been nothing but a dud after all. She grayed out, came back some 4 minutes later, with a bat roosting on the bridge of her nose, popping bloody tears from her cheek. No, you dirty fuck, she screamed, tore it in two, revulsion and agony. It made the sound like thick paper, tearing paper. Alien guts dribbled onto her upturned, cobweb-smeared face. She could not open her mouth to scream. Let me die, God, please. Don't let me be like this. Don't let me become. Because it would dribble its dying self into her, and then Hump's M16 exploded under the striker with an undramatic wet bang. Green light lit first square of the trapdoor, then the whole world. For one moment, Ruth could see the bones of the bats starting out clearly, as if in an X-ray picture, and then all the green turned black. It was 3:05 p.m. 17. All over Haven, people were lying down. Some had gone to their cellars with a vague notion that now would be a good time to get preserves. Some with just an idea that it would be cooler there. Ben Jernigan, lay behind the counter of the Haven lunch with his hands placed behind his neck. He was thinking of the thing in the back of his truck, the thing under the tarp. 3:05, the base of the clock tower burst open, spraying powdered brick everywhere. A huge explosive bellow chased off across the fields. It broke almost every window in Haven, and a good many in Troy and Albion as well. Green fire spilled out through the jagged rent in the bricks, and the town hall began to rise. A surreal brick missile. I'm trying to put my blankets on my feet. A maggot rocket with a clock on its side. It rose on the pillar of cold green fire, surely cold, else the dolls would have been consumed, and Ruth McCausland's arm as well, the entire village for that matter. Clock tower rose on this green torch, its shades now beginning to bulge outward. Yet for an instant the illusion held. A brick rocket rising into the afternoon sky, and through the roar of the explosion, the clock could be heard, bellowing out hour after hour. On the 12th stroke, noon, midnight, it exploded like an ill-fated challenger. Bricks flew everywhere. Benton roads would later see some of the damage, but the worst of all was quickly covered up. Flying brick punched through the sides of houses, cellar windows, board fences. Bricks fell from the sky like bombs. The clock's long hand, lacy wrought iron, whickered through the air like a deadly boomerang and buried itself in one of the ancient oaks which stood outside the Haven Library. Masonry and splintered boards rumbled back and forth, then silence. After a while, the people all over Haven began to get cautiously to their feet. Look around, begin sweeping up glass or examining damage. Destruction had swept the town. No one had been hurt. And in this entire town, only one person had actually seen that brick rocket rising into the air. A madman's grandiose dream. That one person was Jim Gardner. Bobbi was taking a little nap. Gardner had coaxed her into it. Neither of them had any business working in the heat of the afternoon, especially not Bobbi. She had come back a little from the terrible state in which Gardner had found her, but she was still pushing herself much too hard. She abruptly began to menstruate heavy again. I wonder, thought morbidly, what she's going to need a blood transfusion instead of just a couple of extra iron pills a day. But that was unlikely, he knew. His ex-wife had suffered horrible menstrual problems, possibly because her mother had given her the drug known as DES. The Gardner had gotten a crash course in a body function his own body would never perform. And he knew the layman's idea of menstruation. A monthly flow of blood from the vagina simply wasn't true. Most of the material which made up the menses wasn't blood at all, but useless tissue. Menstruation was an efficient waste removal process on behalf of a woman capable of bearing children, but not currently doing so. No, he doubted if Bobbi would bleed to death, barring a uterine rupture, which was highly unlikely. Bullshit, you don't know what's likely in this situation and what isn't. Okay, fair enough. But he knew the woman wasn't built to menstruate day after day and week after week, no matter what. At bottom, blood and tissue were both the same thing, the stuff of which Bobbi Anderson was made. It was like cannibalism, but no, it wasn't. It was as if someone had turned their thermostat all the way to the end of the dial. She was burning herself up. She had nearly keeled over a couple of times doing the hot spell of the week before. Gardner knew that. Although it sounded grotesque, the hunt for the little brown boy had actually been a kind of rest for Bobbi. Gardner hadn't really believed he would get her to take a nap. Then, around 2:45, Bobbi had said that she was sort of tired and that maybe she could use a nap. She asked Gardner if he wasn't going to catch an hour of rack time as well. Yes, he said. I'll sit on the porch and read a few minutes first. Finish this little drinky poo while I'm at it. Well, don't hang out too long, Bobbi said. A siesta wouldn't hurt you either. But he had hung out long enough, stretching the drink, to still be there when the roar crossed the hills between here and the village, roughly 5 miles. What the fuck? The roar grew louder, and suddenly he saw it. Something out of the nightmare. It was DT's setting. It was DT's setting in. Had to be. Fucking had to be. This was no telepathic typewriter or water heater from space. This was a motherfucking brick rocket taken off from Haven Village. And that was it. Everybody out of the pool, friends and neighbors. I've definitely blown my wheels. Just before it exploded, splashing the sky with green fire. He recognized it and knew it was no hallucination. There was Bobbi Anderson's power. There was what they were going to use to stop the nukes, the arms race, the bloody tide of worldwide madness. There it was, rising into the sky on a pillar of flame. One of the crazies in town had somehow laid a fuse under the town hall, struck a match to it, and had just sent the Haven clock tower into the sky like a fucking Roman candle. Holy shit, Gardner whispered in a tiny, horrified voice. There it is, Gard. Behold the future. It is what you want. Better that woman is there. In there is going to bug house, and you know it. The signs are just all too clear. You want me to pull that kind of power on that kind of power on your hands? Do you? She's not crazy, Gardner responded, scared. Not crazy at all. But do you think what you just saw changes the equation? It doesn't. It only underlines it. If not me and Bobbi, then who? The Dallas police, that's who. It is going to be all right. I'll keep an eye on her. Keep a check-in on her. Oh, you're doing great at that. You fucking lush, just great. The incredible thing in the sky exploded, flashing green fire everywhere. Gardner shielded his eyes. He had gotten to his feet. Anderson came out on the run. The hell was that? She asked. She knew. She knew, and Gardner, with cold, sudden certainty, knew that she knew. Gardner threw a barrier across his mind. In the last 2 weeks, he had learned how to do that with complete success. The barrier consisted of nothing more than a random recitation. Excuse me. Lost my place. The barrier consisted of nothing more than a random recitation of old addresses, bits of poems, snatches of songs, but it worked. It was not at all difficult to run such jamming interference. She had discovered wasn't much from the random run of thoughts that went through almost everyone's head most of the time. He might have changed his idea if he had been aware of Ruth. It wasn't much different from the random runs of thoughts that went through almost everyone's head most of the time. He thought he had changed his mind if he might have changed his mind if he had been aware that Ruth McCausland's tortured efforts to hide her thoughts. Gardner had no idea how much trouble the plate in his head was saving him. He had seen Bobbi looking at him in a queer, puzzled way a couple of times, and although she looked away whenever she saw Gardner observing her, she knew that he was trying to read his thoughts, trying hard, still failing. He used the barrier to cover his first lie to Bobbi, since he had thrown in with her on July 5th, almost 3 weeks ago. I don't know exactly, he said. I dozed off in the chair. I heard an explosion and saw a big flash of light. Looked green, that's all. Bobbi's eyes searched his face, and then she nodded. Well, I guess we better go into the village and see. Gardner relaxed slightly. He wasn't sure why he had lied, only that it seemed safer to do so. She had believed him, nor did he want to endanger that belief. Would you mind going alone? I mean, if you want company. No, it's fine, she said almost eagerly, and went. Walking back to the porch after seeing the truck down the road, he kicked over his glass. The water was getting out of hand. The drinking was getting out of hand, and it was time to stop, because something really weird was happening here. It would bear watching. It was a pledge he had made before. Sometimes it even took a while. This time it didn't. Gardner was sitting drunk and sleeping on the porch that night when Bobbi returned. Ruth's signal had been received nonetheless. The receiver had troubled mind, still committed to Bobbi's project, yet uneasy enough about it to be boozing more and more. But it hadn't been received, at least partially understood. Gardner's lie was an indication of that. Nothing wrong. Indication of that, if nothing else. But Ruth would perhaps have been happier with her other accomplishments. Voices or no voices. The lady died sane. And we're going to stop there. There's my bookmark. And tomorrow morning we are going to read Beach, Jernigan, and Dick Allison and see what they're up to. In this chapter, let's see before I get off. Oh, it's small, so we'll probably get into chapter 8, which is Ev Hillman. That one's long. So we're going to get through 7, but we might not get through 8, but we're going to try. So that's our goal. But I just want to thank you for being with me. I don't know why I'm yawning suddenly, but my eyes are going buggy, so I'm glad I was almost done reading, because I'll be reading and then the words go blurry and just so confused I can't read, so I have to concentrate, and that's how I know I need to stop. Oh, we got almost 2 hours in today. Pretty good. So I just want to thank you guys for being here. I really do. I appreciate it. Y'all are great. Thank you for watching. Remember, I love you. Follow if you haven't. That way you'll know when I'm coming. And yeah, there's also the link to our Discord group on the main page, on my main channel page. So please hit that if you want to keep updated. All right. Night, guys.